È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
la civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Benvenuti a questo incontro sui percorsi.
So, good afternoon. We're here to talk about the pathways for peace. I would like to give a warm welcome to Monsignor Vincenzo Paglia, the President of Pontificia Accademia per la Pace, and to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Italy, Antonio Tajani. We are in a situation in the world that Pope Francis defined a third world war in pieces. This is a dramatic situation. We are immersed in conflicts that up until not long ago seemed unimaginable. And we know very well how difficult it can be to find pathways for peace, because peace has to be built and looked for with diplomacy, and then also through initiatives of reconciliation among peoples. This is going to be the topic of our discussion, and I'd like to start with a question to Monsignor Paglia. So the commitments and the responsibilities of the Church are at a twofold level. The two levels are very much intertwined, but they're separate. On the one hand, we have the commitments of Compagnia delle Opere, of the various orders, and the many initiatives that try and carry out initiatives in favor of peace and solidarity. And then we have the Church's diplomatic activity at an institutional level. In your view, what are the priorities of the Church in its commitment in favor of peace? So first of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation and welcome to you all. I think that the Church's first commitment is not political. It is a humanistic commitment, and it consists in giving all peoples a vision. It is the lack of a vision which is the very profound reason of the 59 wars out there, as well as of the overall failure of globalization. We listened to John Pope II's recorded voice before. And starting from there, in 1992, on the 2nd of December 1992, Pope John Paul II welcomed Mikhail Gorbachev. And it was love at first sight between them. So we had Europe united from the Atlantic to the Urals. Slightly more than 30 years have passed from that moment, and we are now in the middle of an incredible fratricidal war inside Europe. And that is because we don't have a vision. We don't have a vision for Europe. We don't have a vision for the world. And Pope Francis is aware of this. That is why he gave us a vision that, in my view, should be the starting point for the activity of the political world. So Laudato Si, and everybody should be brother. That should be the overall vision. We all inhabit the same house, which is the planet, we all belong to the same family. But unfortunately, this appears not to be the case. I was a young guy when McLuhan talked about the world and described it as a global village. And in fact, we believe that our home is the world, and everybody should stay away from that. We have erected endless walls. And that is why I believe that Pope Francis is very topical in suggesting to us that there is a vision whose aim is to bring peoples together and to have them feel as the inhabitants of the same house and ones in charge of the same family. Allow me to briefly address the topic of the various churches. In Russia, in the Ukraine, we have a war waged between brothers belonging to the same church. I remember that there was a very important statement by Patriarch Athenagoras, the one who hugged Paul VI. I don't know if you remember him. He used to say that the churches have to be sisters and the peoples have to be brothers. And now it's difficult to basically state that same thing. This is something, however, that the church has to suggest, together with the fact that it insists on the fact that multilateral dialogue has to prevail. The focus should be on the meeting between major organizations. The UN should be defended as well as Europe. The European Union and the UN have become weaker. That is what Pope Francis has referred to. On an Italian newspaper today, I read that the only solution for the war between Israel and the Palestine would be that the church moves to Gaza, to the Gaza Strip. This is quite singular, this is quite significant, but it tells us that we are in need of a strong vision. Much still has to be done, and I really hope we can also address the topic of the proximity of Christian communities to the poor. This brings me to Africa. Thank God, Africa, in spite of the fact that it's going through a very difficult moment where the states run the risk of becoming weaker, and their governments run the risk of becoming weaker. So the risk is that one of the reasons of conflicts is that these are, in a way, supported by Catholic volunteers so that they can support governments. And I'm very happy that I am addressing here also Mr. Tajani, who is Minister for Foreign Affairs. We have the Piano Mattei, the Mattei plan in Africa, and that was a strong and extraordinary intuition. And I think, Mr. Minister, we have to really implement the Mattei plan, because that's the right way to go to reach peace. I really hope that the Catholic Church finds in the Italian government as well a very peculiar partner. There was a problem in the year 2000. There was an event back then, the Chinese bank holiday. And I remember that the prime minister back then was Mr. Amato, and the Chinese prime minister actually addressed Mr. D'Amati and basically reproached him on the fact that the Vatican had, in a way, sanctified the Chinese saints. And Mr. D'Amato replied that actually he was not responsible for that, because he was not responsible of the Vatican state. But that testifies to the fact that the Church, the Vatican, and the Italian state are perceived as being very close one to the other. Thank you.
Monsignor Paglia ha già anticipato.
Well, Monsignor Paglia already said something about this question. Italy, well, since you are a Minister of Foreign Affairs, has continued to work to create an international cooperation in order to prevent many wars that could emerge because of a lack of resources, because of an unbearable poverty. So the question is, what are the initiatives? We have, for instance, the Mattei plan that Monsignor Paglia mentioned. What are the government initiatives in terms of prevention in the field of international cooperation? Good afternoon to everyone, first of all, and thanks for the invitation. Well, in terms of international cooperation, this is a fundamental tool of Italian foreign policy because we are a country that is always welcomed, a country that is looked at with great attention, especially African states. We are, I may say, the most beloved countries in Europe because we never had a neo-colonial mentality. We've always supported the growth of the African continent without exploiting their resources, because Africa is a rich continent, but not all African people have discovered this richness. We have a way to discover the treasures of the African continent. The Mattei plan is meant to strengthen and reinforce the resources of the African countries. As a President of the European Parliament and as European Commissioner, I have always thought that we should have a Marshall Plan for Africa. What are the big issues that Africa has to face today? In 2050, we will have 2.5 billion Africans in the world. So demography is a problem. I don't know what might happen. I don't know where these African people will live or where they move to. Migration flows are just a part of the problem. We need to go back to the roots of the problems of the African continent. So we have the climate change, because the desert is actually eating up arable land, and so actually this might lead to farmers then joining terroristic groups. Then there is a health problem. Vaccines is one of the main problems. Child mortality is around 3 years of age. I have 2 grandchildren. My grandchildren are about 3-4 years of age, so really this gives me the shivers. We need a big vaccine campaign. So at the vaccination campaign, so at the G7 in October, we have invited José Manuel Barroso, who leads a great organization of vaccination campaigns, and Italy does contribute to this in a substantial way, because we need a vaccination campaign, because what has already been done, the life expectancy for children has increased, but as I said, 3 years of age is something that is really appalling. You cannot accept that as an age for children to die. Then there is a problem of poverty. They need modern agriculture, an industrial system that works. And since Africa is rich in raw materials, we should and could create mixed companies that could extract raw materials and process them in Africa with African labor forces. If we want to create jobs and if we want to encourage growth in Africa, we have to give African people jobs. So this is another fundamental point. Then there is another aspect, that of education and training. Through our universities, we should favor the development of universities in Africa, so that this continent can have a managerial class that is up to the greatness of this continent. And then we have tribal wars, ethnic wars, which need to be avoided. Let's think about sub-Saharan Africa, which is in a way the one that is closest to us, but we could actually take into consideration also the central and southern part of Africa. But anyway, let's think about Sudan, about Niger, and in Niger as well, only Italian soldiers are welcome, because they are good at integrating with other soldiers. So this is why Italy can play a very important role, because Italy is actually well accepted in Africa. We don't want that African people see Putin as an alternative to colonialism. They don't even know who Putin is. In Niger, there was a great demonstration a few months ago, and they were flagging the image of Putin just because they wanted to protest against the old traditional French colonialism. But, well, the situation would improve with a Russian or Chinese lead. So the only possible way is that of cooperation with Italy. So we're working a lot in the field of agriculture, and here we have the great issue of water supply, because here in the pavilion of the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, one of the pillars of the pavilion is water and water supply. So this is an issue that is fundamental for the African continent, but for the whole world as well. And we do not talk enough about water that is needed for energy, agriculture. And if we want to develop nuclear energy, and if we look at the nuclear plants that are being built in China, we should actually try to speed up the development of nuclear energy in Italy. So, well, you need water to have nuclear energy. So this is a resource that we continue to waste. We should, well, teach African people not to waste water, but we should learn ourselves how to safeguard this great resource. So there are so many different issues, there are so many things we have to do, and we should show that our know-how could be beneficial to the growth of the African continent. I think we should increase the number of students that African students study in Italy. The University for Foreigners in Perugia is doing a great job, but maybe we need more than that. So this is a way to build a bridge with Africa and to have more, so to speak, ambassadors of both continents, more Africans that speak Italian, that could actually create relationships with our enterprises and attract Italian enterprises in Africa. So there is this kind of exchange. And I'm not going to talk about Africans that could become Italian citizens. I don't want to talk about this. So I'm talking about the school right for immigrants that is now being discussed as a draft law in Italy.
Monsignor Paglia, lei prima ha parlato delle comunità.
Sì.
No, se vuoi.
So you talked about communities, Monsignor Paglia. If democracy works, well, weapons can be set aside. But this doesn't equal peace yet, because if there is no reconciliation between peoples, well, then there can be conflicts, and Europe is an example of this. However, Europe, and there is a very nice exhibition on the Gasperi, Europe shows that even after two terrible wars, Europe has shown that reconciliation between peoples is still possible. And the role of the Church in this reconciliation has been fundamental. Also because the protagonists were Christians, for example, Chauvin or the Gasperi. More generally, in this very difficult historical period, what can the Church do so that peoples do not in a way, still continue pursuing their efforts towards reconciliation? There's an aspect I would like to stress. Pope Francis says that we are in the middle of a third world war in pieces. The fact is that we are already tearing the world in pieces. We are destroying the world already, and we continue doing so. What I hope for is that politics and diplomacy recover their primacy again, their leading role again, instead of the leading role played by wars and by weapons. We have lost the power of words, and that's the very strength of diplomacy, both the official one and the one that comes from personal relations. Today we talk about weapons, we talk about wars, we talk about rearmament, or, for example, armies being set up. And I believe this is the most important failure of current politics. We stopped believing in the strength of words and of negotiation because we now believe that weapons are stronger than words. But actually, weapons kill, they do not convince. And that is why I would like to say that the Ministry for Foreign Affairs becomes stronger rather than the Ministry of the Church. And I'm saying this because I believe that the activity of convincing other people is very important. In my humble experience, I think that an alliance between diplomacies and enables to find agreements. They enable to achieve positive results, even peace agreements. This is personally what happened in 1992 in Mozambique. This is what happened before the war between Serbs and Albanians and the Albanians in Kosovo, with the pact covenant that Milosevic and Rugova signed. I might also refer to other cases where agreements were reached, and this is precisely what we're doing now. But I believe that the need for diplomatic relations between states is even stronger. And I believe that the Church is fully at everybody's disposal, both in its activity of convincing other people, of negotiating, and of reconciling between peoples. Proximity to the Ukrainians or to the Palestinians, in my view, is decisive. And this applies to the other African peoples as well. 4 years ago, I happened to be in North Uganda, and I happened to visit a refugee camp in South Sudan of 500,000 people. And actually, 500,000 refugees in one of the refugee camps in northern Uganda. And there, it is, of course, decisive to adopt an approach based on solidarity. That is why I believe that the Catholic Church, as well as many other churches, serve as a perfect model. Let me give you an example. There are humanitarian corridors in Italy done set up by the community of Sant'Egidio and the Waldensian Church and other Protestants. That's a solid activity that enables migrants to go to the refugee camps, and they're brought from there to Italy with the authorization of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And then there are people here welcoming them. And then there are families or parishes or other institutions who are very, very glad. They're happy to be able to welcome these migrants. Then, of course, we will have to support them in their integration process. But what I want to say is that if there is an alliance between politics, government, and the church, is an alliance which is fundamental. It is paramount if we are peace to progress. And in this respect, I think that in the field of politics, and we were talking about cooperation before. I mean, cooperation is an extraordinary way to reach peace. So I would hope that when weapons are set aside, I would like solidarity and peaceful relations and dialogue between people are strengthened. Local bishops, what kind of role do they have in this? Well, local bishops are playing an exceptional, fantastic role in this respect. We may even call them the leading class of the Catholic Church, and they serve as an example because they truly give life, and sometimes they even perish to help the most marginalized populations. And they do so together with many lay people. There are lots of lay people, Christian lay people, Christians, lay people, or members of other religious faiths. If you go and see the exhibition, just have a look of the hospices for terminally ill patients, supported by the Orthodoxes as well. These are miracles that should be shown, and they should be brought to the attention of the whole world. So that is why I believe that the example based on solidarity and peace that brings together governmental institutions is very important. I honestly have to thank the role of Italian embassies in the countries where I carried out my duties. That is why I think that there should be, in a way, generosity and pride on the part of everybody to give voice and solidarity, more voice than peace. All too often, the word peace runs the risk of being neglected. And then, unfortunately, for many people, only the word war is the one that is uttered. I am very nostalgic about what Don Sturzo said after the First World War when he was in London, after millions of people died. I mean, he wrote a book that was then republished in 1951, and he wrote that war should be outlawed, exactly as slavery was outlawed. So war should be outlawed, because especially today, war cannot be an instrument for peace. War always leaves the world in a worse condition compared to the prior situation. That is why there should be some kind of a more decisive cultural trigger to give peace the, in a way, permanent, stable condition for peaceful cohabitation between peoples, between different peoples. And in this, I really hope that the Italian government, and specifically the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, can speed up and even reinforce and strengthen its commitment. Actually, the minister is actually smiling. He's saying that apparently we need a lot of prayers for this to happen, but we will pray for that.
Penso che quanti dei
Well, I believe that everyone here prays for peace, but God uses, in a way, men to build peace. So, well, we all agree that Italian diplomacy is very well seen at international and global level. So you need to be determined, but you need to be also kind. And at international level, Italy works within the context of the European Union. So what are the diplomatic initiatives that the European Union can bring about? Well, first of all, for the war at the heart of Europe, in Ukraine, as well as for other conflicts, as, for instance, in the Near East, the Middle East. Well, first of all, Europe should play a certain role. That is to say, it should be a single voice that delivers a message of peace, because the European Union was created to avoid that another world war could take place. De Gasperi, Schuman, and Konrad Adenauer were thinking about this when they created, in a way, the European Union community at the time. Anyway, Europe is often too weak because it doesn't have the necessary tools to act. It doesn't have any military tool. This is the first thing to say. So I'm saying this knowing that this bears with it a great responsibility for me. So Europe should be able to give some messages to contribute to some decision-making, especially in the Mediterranean area, in the areas that are geographically close to us. Unfortunately, Europe is not a federation of states. It is just a group of states that still want to act on their own without creating a synergy of their potential, of their strength. Therefore, Europe is politically weak. We need to make a quality leap. I don't know if we can do that. When I say that we need to switch from the unanimity vote to a majority vote, I say that because if we want to make bold choices, we needed to avoid the power of veto for one single state. When I say that the European Parliament needs to have legislative power, I also mean that it has to be more democratic. So there has to be the involvement of all European peoples. When I say that the European Central Bank shouldn't deal only with inflation, as foreseen by the treaty, but also it should also use the euro to foster growth, well, that's what I mean. Sometimes people say that I'm against it because I say all these things. Well, I am. My father was in the military. I have always been taught to salute the Italian flag, so I am not against Italy. This is clear. But at the same time, I need to understand to be an Italian, how to be an Italian patriot and to safeguard my homeland. My homeland is more than just the Italian flag. We need to be part of a wider picture. Which is very natural. This is our culture. This is our identity. We have a European identity. The father of the Italian language is Dante Alighieri, and he was already, in a way, pro-Europe. And I was at an event on Dante in Ravenna, and I talked about this side of Dante as a pro-European. I do not understand why people think that if I am pro-Europe, I'm against Italy. It is exactly the opposite. By being pro-Europe, I'm pro-Italy. It's not you. People say it is just the European Union that takes decisions, but we are part of the European Union. Europe needs us, needs our culture, our identity, our know-how, our research, our universities, our enterprises, 4 million SMEs. But if we do not make this quality leap, then we cannot say that Europe is not decisive. Well, Italy might try and bring peace in the Middle East with Great Britain and France, or together with Switzerland, we try to do something to have another peace conference for Ukraine. But, I mean, if a couple of countries do this, then you have a certain kind of outcome. But if the whole of Europe does that, then the result will be completely different. I'm not in favor of a super state. I do want to have a sovereignty that is protected. I do not want another Soviet Union. So we have, let's think about our flags. The blue flag, like the blue veil of the Virgin Mary, and the 12 stars that are the stars around the head of the Virgin Mary. So, well, I dedicated 30 years of my life to democracy, and I have always thought that we need to have a political Europe where we can give our own contribution as a country, have our own authority, and we have to be like the United States, like China. Otherwise, we are a certain number of small states with their own strong national identity, but we won't have a say in the national picture, in the international picture. So. When I talk about this new law on school rights for immigrants, Ius Scholi, I insist because I believe this is the Italian reality. We need to think who are today's Italian. We need to be realistic, and I want to just say something about what Monsignor Paglia said. When he said we need more politics and less wars. Well, the politics are always the cause of war. And a philosopher used to say that the war is the continuation of politics. If you cannot convince someone with the political action, you do that by force, fighting. I'm not saying that politics shouldn't be strong, but I just would like to have more Europe and less weapons. This is the challenge that we have to face. But I agree with you, but then our choices are political choices. So political decision makers should be brave enough to use the military tool, which is necessary, we have to admit that, but a positive Italian military tool. So, well, we come from the same region, so we are actually partly friends in a way. So the Italian military between Kosovo and Serbs are loved by both the people from Kosovo and from Serbia, because they actually safeguard stability and peace. And the same happens to Italian soldiers between Lebanon, with the Hezbollah, and Israel. They have sent away all the soldiers that were in Niger except for Italian soldiers. So the politics should use the military tool to create peace. So it is a responsibility of political decision makers if we have wars. You've been maybe too good, too kind. It's our fault. I was listening to the minister now talking about Europe with his enthusiasm, and he's been at the heart of Europe. He was talking about the importance of cohesion in Europe. This is the problem we're facing today, because unfortunately, this politics is the real great politics with a great strength. But now this is not what is happening, because each country goes along its own path. So I think about some kind of European Camaldoli. When in the 40s, Italy had to start rebuild the country, when all the political forces, communists, socialists, Catholics, they all went together and wrote a common text, the Constitution, which wasn't meant either for Catholics or for communists. It was meant for the Italian people. So this is the weakness we witness today in Italian and European politics, because without the kind of Europe the minister was talking about, it is very difficult that our humanistic side can be seen in international politics. We have a great richness that should be translated into international politics. And this is one of the main themes that we should deal with. 2,000 years ago, a certain Paul, condemned in Turkey, said, "Civis Romanus sum," I am a citizen of Rome. And, well, they stopped, and it was sent to Rome. Let's think about this in Erdogan's Turkey.
Hanno trasformato ancora una chiesa.
Where they have recently turned a Byzantine church into a mosque. So this...
Yes, you're right, but the problem is that this Europe also has to have a soul. There have to be political leaders. If bureaucracy is the only guide, then that means that we've failed. So I agree with you, but actually, how can we heal these evils? What we try is to send to Europe politicians with less leadership. I mean, this has been the case for Italy. Things have changed for some years, but this shouldn't be the case. Two great popes, Benedict XVI and John Paul II, fought to give Europe a soul. However, having a soul doesn't mean that one is against somebody else. The stronger your soul, the more willing you are to open up. And this is something that people do not understand. For example, everybody is now attacking me these days because I am in favor of this jus scholae, which is this right to guarantee citizenship if you have performed education in Italy, primary education in Italy. That doesn't mean that I am left-oriented or a revolutionary. Fact is that we have to look at reality. I insist very much on education, training, culture, identity, because if you accept to be European substance, then you are European, not because of the color of your skin, but rather because you have certain beliefs inside your soul, because you have certain values inhabiting you, because you have a European soul. And then if your parents were born in Kiev or in La Paz or in Dakar, that doesn't matter. The important thing My name is of Arabic origin. Tajani. It's a spiritualistic, basically, movement from Islam. But I am Christian. I'm not a Muslim. Tajani is a very important Islamic thought. And we are all like that. I mean, we don't have, for example, we have a lot of Italian citizens who have links with other countries. For example, in Naples, we have lots of people linked to Spain. In Frosinone, we have red-haired people, and they are basically, they descend from those who raided that area centuries ago. So the world is done like that. Being Italian or being a European is not linked to the fact, to the 7 generations before. It means to what you are now. I prefer someone who have foreign parents singing the Italian anthem rather than anyone who is Italian of 7 generations and doesn't sing the anthem. Who's the more patriotic between the two? Well, actually, I totally agree. And plus, let me conclude with one more remark. As we are in the home of subsidiarity, and as we have to talk about substantive things, Europe has to become the very mother of subsidiarity. It has to do the things that shouldn't be the responsibility of provinces or regions of states. So it has to, in a way, regulate the big things to give answers to citizens, giving them a political vision. And that's the Europe of subsidiarity, which is strong politically, which is not invasive, with lots of different regulations that sometimes are not needed, and that sum up to the bureaucratic norms of the region and of the states, which create a burden, which are a burden for our economy. We also have to perform a European revolution. The Americans, I mean, it took the Americans about 100 years to reach their national unity. They even had a civil war. To do Europe, to make Europe where lots of different languages are spoken. In America, we have 1 or 2 languages spoken, but that's much easier. In Europe, it's much more difficult. In the past, we had Latin being studied and spoken everybody. Today, not everybody speaks English well. But what's important is the Europe of subsidiarity. So a Europe that shouldn't replace the states, that should be a major political guide, harmonizing the work of the states and providing a vision, a unitarian vision. If there are no values, this is worthless. We are also the only continent in the world where we don't have the death sentence, and this is something we should always remember. I think that this dialogue with Monsignor Palma and Minister Tajani, enabled us to clarify lots of things, and it also showed us to highlight the focal points we should insist on. So, education and welcoming those who come from other countries. Then setting up the European Union, we will have the new parliamentarians and members of the European Parliament from several groups who will address precisely this. They will talk about how the European Parliament can contribute to actually what Minister Tajani has expressed, so that Europe can find its role inside in the international scenario to promote peace, to build peace. I would like to invite any one of you to give a contribution to the Holy Land. We decided yesterday, the Meeting Foundation decided yesterday that after the meeting with Cardinal Pizzaballa, After the first day of the meeting, we'll give a part of the Dona Ora received funds to the Holy Land so that Cardinal Pizzaballa can use this money at best. Allow me one final remark. Our societies run the risk of becoming more and more fragmented. There is also an increase in conflicts in the Western civil society. We know how the very same democracy has become vulnerable. And this not only in the States, but also in some countries in our continent. I think that your presence at the Rimini meeting and the way we discuss and address topics and issues here at the meeting is a perfect example of how a society can work guided by dialogue and peace. And this is a very important example for Europe. It shows Europe how one can live creatively, responsibly, and freely in this continent. So thank you very much for this.
Grazie signor Ministro, grazie Monsignore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Monsignore, and I wish you and enjoy your meeting.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
Avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite